Functionality assessments is a area that you see people do studies on, research of, pilots of, but very few organizations stick with it and follow through for their full inventory. It is challenging to have a single set of questions apply to every building. Last year during the summit, we had the USDA present on why their functionality assessments were good, and DECA did the same. Both of them have very specific buildings that do a very specific thing, and they narrowed their scope of what they perform functionality assessments on. So if you want to go back in time to watch that presentation, I recommend it if you're looking at exploring it. This is more of a demo of how to actually work in the software directly. Because you now can do so without Internet Explorer, Searle has invested time and resources to put functionality more front and center in your capabilities to edit. If you have master planner privileges, you can do so. I do want to, for those that are new, talk about quickly what is an FI score, and then we're going to actually get into how to modify and create FI assessments, and then what is something that I have never seen actually done, which is generate a work item associated to a functional issue. And you all have master planner privileges if you registered, so your email and password allows you to get in there and hack and play.
How long that is going to be at?
Until the next summit. We pretty much purge the previous years and then create a new set. So, the BFI, you will often log in and always see that it's 100 because you have not performed an assessment. So, in general, Builder will assume a perfect functional building until you tell it otherwise. And it scrolls up all the way through your organization and complex and sites. You'll see a functionality score. I went to the SMS help area to copy and paste what is the absolute definition according to Searle of functionality. And this is the suitability to function as intended for the required mission. So things not connected to condition, code, aesthetics, configuration, comfort. You can have perfectly installed lights that are way too intense for how it's being used. And that lowers its ability to perform its mission for the occupants. So everything outside of condition can be, in theory, captured through functionality. I remember telling you that it is assumed 100 until you tell it otherwise. Functionality is not connected to life cycle. Builder does not assume that your FI degrades over time. So in this example, we've done a functionality assessment in year 18. And then year 38, we did another one, dropped it down to a point where we said, hey, I'm going to throw a flag in the air. We need to do a renovation, a modernization effort. You completed it, but didn't do another functionality study for another 5 years. Somebody said, oh, we're back up at that score until you go on. So this is a step function only changing when you tell the software. We've had a great discussion about what BCI is many times. This is the weighted roll-up of all your sections condition. BCI will always trend down if you keep your unsustained assets in inventory. So if you put foundation, superstructure, wall construction, windows, all of those things that don't typically get worked on, you're going to find even if you spend money and renovate your building, that bump of CI is temporary. Your buildings, just like people, tend to degrade. Tell my knees. So, when you combine your functionality score with your condition score, this new blended orange line is your performance index. So, Builder creates that. It's in the interface. It's not something that people often refer back to because of the functionality, but that performance index is supposed to be, from a planner's perspective, kind of the one ring to rule them all. Give me one metric to say, how likely am I to be able to perform my mission? Due to condition problems, due to configuration problems, all of my mission needs. Question in the back?
Yeah, that's the one that's formed from the weighted average for worst condition gets 80% and your best condition gets 20% of that value?
You're
Slightly off.
but close.
Yeah, basically this is what I'm talking about.
So your performance index is that blend of condition and functionality with the worst carrying the majority of that weight. And it makes sense because even if your facility is in perfect condition, there is not a single piece of equipment that will fail, none of your walls have holes in them, condition is perfect, but is dramatically terrible in how it's functioning, that performance is low because you're likely not able to do your mission. So whatever is worse, no matter if it's perfectly configured, super energy efficient, beautiful, but your equipment is falling apart and you don't have an air conditioning and you don't have electrical, you still are not going to be able to perform your mission. So yes, 70-30 roughly with the weight to the lowest. And now, I know that you guys have been super patient to get through all these software demos, but this is the third tab in Builder. You're used to the inventory side. This is where we put in all of our sections, quantify them, measure them, name them. Condition is where we add direct ratings. That last tab is functionality. You're going to navigate down to a facility, start a new functionality assessment. Pretty much everybody will have the SERL standard set loaded, and now you get, for a building, you get to identify green, amber, red, perform wizards. Those wizards allow you to have logic in your tests. Not every facility needs to maintain the same ADA standards depending upon when it was constructed. So a wizard allows you to say, hey, when was this building built? Oh, it's a 60s building. Okay, so you have a different set of questions. One of the wizards I like is energy efficiency, and it pops up a box that shows you all of your equipment that you've added as sections, and then you get to hit a checkbox next to anything that you say is inefficient. So all of your more complex logic is there in wizards. This is intended for customization to your audience. For the commissary, it's not necessarily expected to be the same set of questions as DODIA. These are two different users with two different audiences. So in your tools library section of Builder now, you have the access to the functionality modules. This was always previously available, just never accessible through the user. SERL still sees this as something that is a power user / expert only, so they've not included in the help documentation how to manage your module, but I like hacking at playing to things like Steve, so I'll just figure it out and then ask questions later. When you start an assessment, functionality assessment, you're first asked, what is the set that you want to use? You now actually have the capability in Builder to say, this is a site assessment. This is my complex assessment. So not every assessment needs to be just at the building. When you say I'm looking to add an assessment set, this is an example of what we did with the Coast Guard to show the capabilities of, hey, we can do this and repurpose an existing test that they've always had to do. They look for what is our resiliency of our facilities. So now that I've created a set called resiliency, I need to go in and create an assessment question list. Back in that library, you get to label it, create another name, and then you say, what is the name of my assessment question set? Is it a wizard? Is it just a FI deduct number where you're saying, every time I tell you something is not green, drop points off of FI. If my resiliency is, how susceptible to flooding am I? You say, well, you're not green, you're not perfect, you're an amber. You're in a floodplain, but you have a mitigation plan. Or red, you're in a floodplain and you don't have a mitigation plan, then you're dropping points. And you see the target here is, this is intended to be assessed at the facility level. Once you've started that process of adding a question set, you can continue to number down and add all the different questions that you want. This is the key area that's going to determine how those points are calculated. A functionality score is going to generate a number between 1 and 100, no matter what. So, how your score is rated and what questions are going to be available to the user. Is it a basic condition rating, green, amber, red? Are you going to ask density, green, amber, red with a drop down? All of those rules are in Builder. So back in my Builder Software Net, we are in Tools, Library, Modules. See if that works. And the one area I didn't click into and take a screenshot of is within your assessments. And let's go with the facility resiliency. You see that you're given the option for what is the rule set, what is the question, and what is the option for the user as a drop-down. All of that is defined in your value categories. So this says, based upon this drop-down value, I'm going to have a deduct of 1 point versus a deduct of 3 points. So all of this is meant for you to craft the rules to say, ask a series of questions, get a resulting score that is consistent. It's not necessarily meant to be objective. You know, there is going to be subjectivity to it, but if you do the same subjective process every time and have a structure for how you answer every question, then it's still valuable information. Aesthetics, if you survey the same 10 people for every building of the same users, you can see, do I have a problem with recruiting because I have ugly buildings? All of your wizard questions, even things that you think are maybe more complicated, still have a UI to be able to say, this is a question where the drop down is very good, good, poor, excellent, and fair. And here's my deduct points. My strategy for creating a question with the rules that I like, let's go back down to again, we're in the functionality. We've selected a facility. You say, I'm going to do a new assessment. And I'm going to use my functionality question set. If you like how one of these questions are scored, you don't have to create your own. Just use that same type. If you like the green, amber, not applicable, like it's not applicable that it's a floodplain question because this is a fence post that doesn't have to worry about floodplains, okay. NA is a perfectly reasonable answer. Once you find which question type you want to use, go back to that value category and you can always pull those into your assessment. Delete those things that don't add value to your organization. You don't have to keep the default Searle built functionality question sets. You don't have to build the high performance, facility or the cultural assessment. High performance, what's the SB?
Sustainable buildings.
High performance sustainable buildings. If that's not important to you, now you can go into your tools, your library, modules, and delete those from even being available for users to select. So, once you have your questions in your assessments, your value categories set up, you just go in here and say, for my organization, these are the issues that I want to include in this question set. I would like to see eventually different fact codes getting a different assessment question set. Barracks housing probably should be asked different questions than munition storage, than a laboratory, a hospital. Your fact code might be a good way to say, let's segment a scoring algorithm that's relevant for this building type. DECA has been awesome in their use of functionality because they have one building type that they care about. It's a store. USDA, they care about their expensive labs. So air quality, HVAC, electrical, there's all the same types of questions that are relevant for every facility that they care about. For those with a more dynamic mix, create a different set for different building types. And now that you have created a new assessment set, you go back to your facility, create a new assessment, and now you see resiliency as an option. And just for clarity, this is what's going to generate your overall FI score. These are the FI issues. So where that's important to not just have one long list is that when we generate work, we have the ability to say, is this overall score below a certain point? Let's schedule the entire building for renovation. Or do I just have a wildfire risk? I don't need the whole building addressed, I just need some money spent to mitigate that. So you can separate work to say trigger problems at this level or trigger problems at the overall building level. And now you can take photos, leave notes, and have a drop down and question sets that align to you. So this is what we built for the Coast Guard, and not all of these questions are the same. You see that my response type for here was, what type of zone, D1 through I think 3 versus green, amber, red. Because we are trying to align it to, let's see if I can zoom it in. This is the existing decision points that the assessment team had to do with their options. So for the seismic and earthquake risk, it's a different question and a different drop-down choice than tsunami wave. Again, customize it, and you can also now bring in another department into the builder family and support your system and say, hey, you don't need to keep this access database that's kind of isolated by itself. You can now bring it into something that's also linked to real property, maybe linked into GIS, maybe linked into other kind of cool CMMSs to say, hey, is there maybe an energy study that is being done on my facilities already that I can have them populated into Builder rather than have it be a separate report that I can't really query easily? And then the last step I wanted to talk about is now that you have the data in Builder, you have a score for each functional assessment issue, which then rolls up to an overall building functionality value. You can generate work. And sadly, Builder does not know what it's going to cost to make a building less ugly. It does have a catalog of costs to change a chiller. It does not have a catalog cost to adjust a floodplain issue. But it will at least raise a flag in the air. And for certain people that have very little confidence in the Builder cost anyways, maybe it's the same value of a flag. So, to start with, we get into our standards. And you see that we went through, on the first day of training, condition standards, and we didn't even address the fact there was a whole nother folder of functionality standards. Now when you create it, you get to label it, create a name, just like everything else, and you have a minimum issue FI for modernization. And what basically it's saying is, Remember those sub-check boxes of we have floodplain as a part of our resiliency. Flood is just one issue, and if it drops below a 60 in its score, put a flag in the air. You have a building performance index. So if your condition and functionality drop below a blended number of 40, this is a candidate for reconstruction. And if your building functionality drops below a 50, which is just the overall facility, weighted sum of all your issues, maybe that's a facility that needs modernization. Now, we talked about having multiple assessment sets for multiple different types of buildings. Your standards are kind of able to be set up separately as well. So this could be just used for hospitals, just used for labs. And we'll show you how to get there later. There was a question in the back.
The performance index, you said it's a combination of BCI and FCI?
FI.
FI, sorry, thank you. Is it just an average of the two, or is it weighting?
It's 70% weighted, or 71% weighted to whatever's lower.
Okay. Thanks.
Just like condition, your functionality standard does not need to be universal and global. You can say, my family housing has one standard that I want to apply, but maybe operational and training has a different set of standards that it needs to maintain. So you can set up multiple functionality, kind of work triggers, and then apply it based upon, facility name, facility MDI, anything that you're looking at by the building level attribute. And then your last step to actually be able to use that policy is to bring it in your sequence. It is going to be used right next to your condition. Since there's no overlap, it just says, this is an available policy, bring it into my sequence. If you set nothing at all, you must set a default functionality standard. So this is if you have only one set of rules that apply to your entire inventory that you want to be able to test against, set it as your default, and then you're good to go. And of course, every time I'm logged out, I hear a chuckle. It's just, there's a, yes. So I'm clicking in fairly quickly. This is always recorded, so go back. But what we're doing is talking about standards, and because you have an environment to play with, down in the 2021 Summit, you'll see the condition ones that we set up on Monday or Tuesday. Now we're talking about functionality standards. So I already have one for critical buildings that have fairly high values. A performance index of 50 is not that hard to get depending upon your FI calculation. But maybe I create a new one, select the folder, hit add, and this is for and just like condition, selected value, override it. And hit save. It makes no sense to start here. You want to start with the test and then run through a pilot. And we talked to the NNSA that they're on pilot round 3 for getting functionality. They have a very dynamic building type set, so trying to find this single set of questions that works for everyone has been tough. So build your questions first, even if it's in a spreadsheet. It doesn't have to be in Builder. And then run through a pilot, see what the scores come out at, and then say, what would I want to do with these scores? Let's try to configure your work standards to based upon what the humans would actually do. Is there a question? Oh.
Where does this flag show up?
Fantastic question. Just like your work condition standards and your policy sequence, all of those functionality elements come in as a work plan. The only way that you'll be able to see that it's different is it'll say, you know, whatever your standard fail was. So back here, it'll say modernization or issue, you know, issue modernization or reconstruction of building, and it has zero cost. But it shows up in your work plan. Right next to your replace the chiller, it's one of these work items.
So when I run a final 8, I will see that on the
Yeah, if it's, now it kind of depends upon how Final 8 was made. Final 8 might have been only made for condition-based work items. I don't know how that was programmed, but it is a work item available in your work plan.
Have you all seen organizations that are using functionality generated work to adopt into their normal project planning process?
Yes. Yeah, and those were the two people that I mentioned earlier with USDA Ag Research and the commissary. So the Ag Research has been doing this for
4 or 5 years.
4 or 5 years?
Was it 14 or 15?
Yes. So they actually have gone through their inventory. Part of the challenge is, you know, when you start and you're doing 20% of your inventory a year, it takes 5 years to get to the overall view of your portfolio. When it comes to functionality, it's helpful to be able to see across all of my facilities, where am I different? Yeah, so they're 5 years in on performing those, and they do use it in their annual reviews.
Yeah, I think we're 6 years into it now.
Yeah. Question in the back?
The existence of this tells me that ISR F ratings are moving this way eventually. You have a timeline?
So the question was, this looks very similar to ISR, you know, questions on mission, and the answer was that they're doing some work right now with Searle to create a functional assessment to try to replicate that capability without any commitments of timelines. Just
Basically, I'm wondering if it's worth my time to build my own.
oh, to log in a builder and build your own.
Yeah.
If it's those same exact questions, I would say find whoever's working on it and make sure they do it right. Sometimes, you know, having separation from the programmers to the implementers is challenging when you actually try to implement. So if you have, you know, a lot of experience, it could be of great value. Oops, sorry, go back. So your policy sequence, and then, you know, the last stage is really, you will, when you hit that generate work items button, it creates functional issues just right along with condition issues, and it spits out that. It does not have an impact on your FCI because it's a zero cost element. So I screamed through that section. I wanted to showcase the capabilities and leave all those screenshots available for you to play. This is also already uploaded. So people have asked, you know, when are we going to be able to get to these slides? When are we going to be able to get to the recordings? The recordings I don't have a good answer for just yet because we have 3 different things that we've been capturing. We've captured a camcorder of the presenter. We've captured the WebEx slides that are just what goes to the projector. So some blend of the two will likely be made available soon. We just want to find out which is the easiest to consume. Sometimes it's nice to see the face, see the room. Other times all you really want to do is see what's on the screen. So there'll be likely some time to edit. But the slides themselves are available right now. So please go and make yourself available to those resources. If this is stuff that you see is awesome and you would like to look at past years, you hear people that come back after 4 years, that means they're getting something out of it. And for those that are new, we try not to duplicate the same agenda or same material 2 years in a row. So there's a lot of stuff that just hasn't been touched on because we might have hit it last year. And with 3 days of material every year, you don't want to hit the same things every time. Thank you so much for coming out and participating. Thank you for the conversations and the dialogue. I put up the email here because Kelly in the back is kind of monitoring that. And last year it was a big thing of, kind of we want a hotel that can offer government rates. Last year we had a challenge with some of the AV for the online participants. We want your feedback of how to make this a better service to the community. If it's more notice, we sent out the call for presentations, but we could be probably more forceful with that and try to get more agencies involved by just saying, is there somebody we need to tap a shoulder and say, no, really, we just want you to do something rather than waiting for them to tell us that they have something to bring. So let us know what's going to add the most value. If the training is still stuff that, you're discovering new and innovative ways to approach Builder based on the training, that's what we want to know. If you still want to see more, program by program stuff, and you're interested more in like, what's the Marines doing? We didn't get an opportunity to kind of pulse them. So this is for you. And we've been trying to keep as minimal selling as possible. If you are wondering what we do, we have handouts in the back and business cards, but want to make sure that this is seen as a workshop for the user community to all get together and share ideas. Thank you again, everybody.